Hello again, everyone. This is September 30, 2018, another lesson in my New Testament is Fake series. This lesson is titled, The Messiah is Anti-Elohim. By saying that, I'm saying that as we put it in the Christian church when I was growing up, that Jesus is a part of the Elohim. So I'm saying he's a part of the Godhead, rather. I'm saying that he is anti-Godhead. That means he is not a part of the Godhead. If he is not a part of the Godhead, that means he has nothing to do with Elohim. If he has nothing to do with Elohim, he's not a part of Elohim, he was not sent by Elohim, then he is not the Messiah supposedly prophesied in the Old Testament. So he cannot provide salvation for the world, for Gentiles, for anybody. This also means that because he's not a part of the Godhead, or he's not a part of quote-unquote Elohim, then he did not come from heaven, did not come from the God of the Hebrews, was not sent by him, and as such, not providing salvation for anyone, he then also is not able to unite by death on Calvary the two kingdoms from the Torah, the two kingdoms of Israel, north and south. He has nothing to do with that, just a big trick. I will attempt to show these things by what the scripture is saying here and there. No point of weakness can exist in any part of Elohim or in any part of the Godhead. Because according to how we were cultured since we were children about the Bible, Elohim cannot have weakness. There is a modern trickery that I've noted. Maybe it's been there all along, but it just seems nearer to me now that I'm looking into it, where you can be cultured in your Sunday school teachings or in your Torah teachings all along to view God a certain way. But then when you start to dig into the Hebrew and look at the Hebrew letters and their meanings and size up the whole culture of ancient Israel, how they lived, then you start to get a slightly or sometimes very different understanding that does not agree with the way you have been cultured by the teachings you received in your own life since you were a child or since you began studying the Torah. This then means that there is a disconnect between the real keen teachings and observations of the text and its Hebrew words and the colloquial or traditional, normal, everyday teaching. I find then this to be a great dishonesty coming out of the mouths of the teachers of the Bible, dealing with Old and New Testament. So whether you're a Christian-based teacher or a Torah teacher, this is dishonest because they'll teach you everything a certain way and you grow up like that. But when you start to study the text and dig into the Hebrew concepts and the Hebrew letters and so on, you find something completely different. This is not a good reflection of God. There's no honesty where that is concerned. It's kind of like the old stuff where when you were a child in school, they taught you an atom is the smallest indivisible part of any matter. Then when you get older, you realize that you really could divide it because they're subatomic particles. And you've got the electrons inside of it and the nucleus and so on. So, and who knows what else they have developed in that teaching today, if there are other subatomic particles or sub-electron particles. But it's similar to that, where you are taught one thing and then as you go, you get another thing. God should be taught just the way you know him. Don't make an excuse and say, well, I taught you that because that's all you could handle. Leave the revelation to God. God should be taught just the way he is. If you're going to teach God in limited ways, you must tell the people at the start that you don't know what you're talking about, but these are the things you think. You got to tell people, we don't know this God, we've never seen him, never met him, but this is what we've learned from other people and what I've seen as well in books and in my own thinking and so on. Because to tell people something, for instance, in the Christian-based teaching, and then when they, after years, find out that the Torah-based views are radically different and more original than the Christian views, people get upset. And some people just say, forget this God stuff. And I've had people tell me that over the course of time, since I've been doing these lessons. People are getting sick of this whole God thing because every now and then there's another change. And so what we really then have are spiritual fools who are teaching God and telling you this is God and this is the way to him and this is how he should be worshipped. And then you realize that that's not how even the book itself is telling you. For instance, this whole sacrifice trip I've been on lately, where I found out that the sacrifices of animals to God and eating them is just not the way that the book is actually telling you to worship God, until the book begins to lie. It seems to me that the earliest, most respectable part of the Torah that I like is when it said that there was a creation, where it said in the beginning God. Now whoever this God is another matter, but I'm talking about the part where it says the heaven and the earth were created. The heaven and the earth just is. But after that, all kinds of arguments begin to happen. And so what we find is that people don't really know. They don't know how we got here. They don't know when we got here. And that's why you've got archaeology and all kinds of excavations going on. And now we're checking under the sea to find destroyed civilizations covered over by the oceans and so on. Because we don't really know all that happened. And even when you look at even these Egyptian pyramids. Now, some are wondering if the Egyptians made the pyramids. But they tell us that they're searching on how the pyramids were built and nobody really knows how. You see, this is a little bit strange to me. Because if the Greeks went in and took over the Egyptians, why didn't they just ask the Egyptians, how did you make it? I mean, it's just as simple as that. How did you do it? So why weren't the Egyptians able to tell them how we built the pyramids? So that seems strange right there. But even just as strange and even more is the thought that the New Testament, in this New Testament is Fake series, is telling you that there can be no point of weakness that can exist within Elohim or in the Godhead. Let's look here at Ecclesiastes chapter 8 and verse 8, which exposes Calvary. And it just takes Calvary down in one verse. It just checkmates Calvary in one verse. Ecclesiastes 8 verse 8, there is no man that hath power over the Spirit to retain the Spirit. Neither hath he power in the day of death, and there is no discharge in that war. So before the verse completes, Calvary is done for right there, it's exposed. But it goes on to say, neither shall wickedness deliver those that are given to it. So if I start from the end of the verse and work back, neither shall wickedness deliver those that are given to it. Death on a cross is to be seen here as wickedness, because it's taking out a man who they say did not deserve death. He didn't do anything wrong. They said he was sinless, so why is he dying in such a wicked way? But it would seem to me that in some kind of way he would deserve this, but they told us it was because God was killing him and turned him over to the Romans to kill him. But certainly death did not release him or give him up, because death was doing the same thing it always does. It does not deliver those that are given to it. This wickedness, you see, it's wickedness because if he was sinless, then to die in that kind of way is wickedness happening to him. But the wickedness of it all does not deliver him. Now, you know, when you go through a hard time, there's all kinds of prayer meetings and people praying for you, your friends praying for you, and so on. He's got all these disciples, the close inner 12, and then he's got all these other followers of his who are disciples from a distance, who show up always at his meetings, and hundreds or thousands listening to his beatitudes and so on. He's got all these nice followers. Plus, he's got the tribes of Israel who are scattered as they be. Some have heard because they would come to Jerusalem every year for their feasts and so on. And they know through the scriptures, because don't tell me they could not figure it out, because you, 2,000 years later, can figure out he is the Messiah from the scriptures, and they knew the scriptures better than you do because they had the better, purer Hebrew back then. So they must have known that Jesus or Yeshua walking with them was the Messiah. But all these 12 tribes coming back to Jerusalem for their feast while he was alive, and his 12 disciples, they never got any victory in prayer to save him from wickedness that was refusing, like a satanic stronghold, to deliver him up. You can storm the throne of heaven, you can do all kinds of bad prayer meetings and so on, and deliver people from demons and from sickness and whatever. Even the disciples are healing people as he sent them out 2 by 2 and so on. And so God hears them and the power moves. But when wickedness seizes their Savior, the very Elohim, Son of God, and by so saying God himself robed in flesh, no prayer on earth can save him. So wickedness was able to have its way with him. So God died, or the Son of God died at the hands and the clutches of wickedness. What kind of God is this? Now that breaks radically from the Torah idea and presentation of the same Elohim in the New Testament that this Jesus is claiming to me, for before Abraham was, I am. And we are taught and cultured from children that the I am is the same I am from the Torah days. Yet still, when God puts on a body and comes to walk among men to reunite and redeem from their transgressions the 2 kingdoms, north and south, for 2 sticks will become one again, death seized this body, so that the rest of the verse now is seen in a better light, as I've explained many videos ago, that there is no man that hath power over the spirit to retain the spirit. So if he is God, it could not apply, because it's saying it's a man that does not have this kind of power to retain the spirit. If he is a God man, you could argue, but maybe still probably not, I don't know. But if the man is in the picture somewhere, whether he's just man alone or God man, then death can seize him because of the man that he is pretending to be. because he robed himself in flesh, and they say God became a man, that he could save us all, or he became a man to reunite the tribes of Israel and redeem Israel from their transgressions. So the moment he becomes a man, it matters little whether you say, but he was still God. The fact is, he is every bit God as he is every bit man. Because if you say he was only 10 or 20% man, then how do you fit in a 20% man walking around on earth? You don't even like it that in America they told you that you were just 3/4 of a man. But here is a 20% man and an 80% God walking around. And the 80% doesn't burn you up with the sheer light of his glory and so on. So it looks like to me he was fully man as much as he was fully God, if the New Testament is correct. So this is not a 20% man, because then would it only be like his feet moving around and the rest of him is just spirit? This is fully man. He ate, he walked, he talked like men were doing. So fully God and fully man is walking. So the man part of him would not have power over the spirit to retain the spirit. So he would die according to the clutches of wickedness. Can you imagine that? God is locked up in a body and wickedness seizes the body. Can you imagine? Let me paint it a different way for you to picture. Can you imagine if cancer was ransacking the body of Jesus and God was locked up in that body of Jesus, and disciples and everybody come see him, and the cancer is eating him out from the inside until it starts to eat out through his skin to show up on the outside with his body rotting, and he's scraping his body, scraping off. Like how they said Job was scraping himself and so on. Right? And so the cancer is, the disease is eating him out from the inside to the outside until sores and pus and all kinds of stuff coming out, and the blood and pieces of melted flesh just dripping off him, and flies everywhere and mosquitoes, everything coming swarming around him, and he's still sitting around trying to explain the Beatitudes. Are you going to worship that kind of God there, sitting down learning Beatitudes from him? So cancer is ransacking the body of Jesus. It's taking out his lungs, it's working on his kidney, it's doing everything. Even his heart, it's starting to attack now, and he can barely move now. You know he's going to die any time. So cancer is bringing this God-man Jesus to death. Now, what kind of God locks himself up in a body, this great Yahweh? And while he's locked up in a body, his body is attacked by the wickedness and the evil and the curse of cancer. Because don't tell me cancer is a blessing in our world. So the cancer would be a curse eating out his body and destroying him. Well, death on Calvary destroyed the body of Jesus that Yahweh, the God of the Hebrews, is locked up in. And you're telling me the New Testament is not fake? The New Testament is checkmated. Right here, one more time. So then, God cannot do anything in a body if he chooses to come in a body where that body suffers some kind of limitation or ill will. Because God must be expressed as God in every move that he makes, in every operation that he undertakes. So it goes on to say, neither hath he power in the day of death. So the man who is Yahweh, God in the flesh, called Jesus or Yeshua, or whatever you call him, he does not have power in the day of death to deliver himself from death. Now, if this is Yahweh locked up in the body of Jesus, or if you want to just play right now and say he is only the Son of God, but on the next Shabbat meeting, you say he is actually God when you're teaching a different kind of lesson from a different view. But if this is only just the Son of Elohim or the Son of God, then he still has the power locked up in him, because we know the New Testament teaches that he did all kinds of fancy stuff by the power that was resident in him, like he even walked on the water. So the power is in him. Yet it is telling you here that the reason why man will not be able to retain his spirit in the day of death is because he does not have the power in the day of death over death to retain his spirit and to go on living. So how does Jesus have the power of God in him to do all these things and walk on water, turn water into wine and so on, and say to the woman at the well, if you knew who was talking to you, you would give him to drink and he would give you living waters, the fountain of life? How can the fountain of life be on the cross and be succumbed by death, because the fountain of life does not have any more life to resist the death that is seizing his body? New Testament is fake. Now, you know what I find interesting? Let me read another verse here. Let me see if I can find it. I think it's Isaiah. Yeah. Isaiah chapter 40 and verse 28 and 29. Hast thou not known, hast thou not heard, that the everlasting God, the Lord, the creator of the ends of the earth, fainteth not? So Jesus should not be fainting. Because if he is made of the stuff of God, if you want to say he's only the Son of God, then he's built of the stuff of God. So fainting is not a part of his makeup. He is the creator of the ends of the earth. He fainteth not, neither is weary. There is no searching of his understanding. But he got weary and said, Hey, I thirst. He giveth power to the faint, and to them that have no might he increaseth strength. But Jesus grew weaker. And they tell us in a warped kind of thinking, it's because he had to die for our sins. So God has to become weak to show you that you should be strong. It looks to me like if he's going to demonstrate strength to you, that's what you would need to see that you should be strong. He should display strength. So now, when the Romans are trying to kill him, because it goes on to say, even the youth shall faint and the young men shall utterly fall. That means the creatures, the people, the humans who are falling and dying is because they are weak and they grow faint and they succumb, they give in. But that which is God does not succumb to anything. So if Jesus is Elohim, or just a part of the Elohim, a part of the Godhead, he cannot fall like men, because then we have no one to look forward to. Because if the Spirit of God is in Jesus, and Jesus is dying when he comes in the flesh, but as the Spirit, as Yahweh in the Old Testament, he does not die, then when the Spirit comes in me, because I learn his Torah and so on, I'm still going to be succumbing. So this is all a big trick. Something is wrong. We've just been given something like a life principle or something like that. There are different names for it. Some call it spirit, some call it whatever. The force, the whatever. That's what I'm seeing from all the studying I'm doing. Nobody really knows what to call it. But somebody tells you it is Yahweh and another person tells you it is Jesus. So if he is really Elohim, even just a part of Elohim as the son of Elohim, then when he is on the cross, he wouldn't have been dying, because no man hath power. But if he is Elohim, then he would have the power to retain his spirit. So the Romans would have had to be there sticking him up in his side all the time. Although that's a problem as well. But they should be going by telling their superiors, we can't kill this one, we can't take him out. This one just can't die. It's like he's got some life about him that's different, like he's out of this world. He's from outside of this world. This is not human. But he was just a man, a character written with the pen of the Romans. So death should not have been able to overpower him. Because that would then mean that, as I think it might have been St. Paul who said it in maybe Hebrews or Romans, that God made a body for him. Sacrifices and offerings thou wouldest not, but a body hast thou prepared for me. So he still got this body, and he comes as Elohim or a part of Elohim. So then Elohim gets into this body. So this is an Elohim body, an Elohim man or a God man. And then this means that this move of God through Jesus, or this Messiah from the Hebrews, is a move of God or an undertaking that God goes on in the world to provide the miracle of salvation and to reunite the two kingdoms, north and south. But no one should have been able to take him out. Whenever you ever seen God carry out an operation in the Torah and somebody disadvantages him and takes him out, this is ridiculous. God never carries out an operation, meaning Yahweh from the Old Testament, and mere mortals can do him in. That is never to be seen in the Torah. So if something is happening that takes out this Messiah, Elohim, from the New Testament, it is not of the Elohim of the Torah, which means the Torah never prophesied that this particular Messiah would come and do these things. It's a big trick. That then means that no such fulfillment of Torah prophecies was done at Calvary. Because Elohim cannot prophesy that Elohim is going to die at Calvary. Because Elohim is just not going to lay down and die in any form. Because there's no death that's going to seize him in any form, in any way, shape, or form. Now let's look at 2 or 3 verses here. Isaiah 26 verse 4, trust ye in the Lord forever, for in the Lord Jehovah is everlasting strength. Look at this word now. Everlasting, olam, often used for talking about like forever, or like, long lasting, everlasting, eternity. It says here, long duration, antiquity, forever, everlasting, evermore, perpetual. So it's saying that this is the kind of strength that Elohim has. And since Elohim cannot be void of this kind of strength, the everlasting strength that he's talking about, that means his strength lasts always, forever. Now, you say if you get God, like in your dreams and your prayers and your wishes and so on, and in your spiritual practices and meditations of the scriptures and whatever, and for you in the Christian church, when you get filled with the Spirit, you want the Spirit because the Spirit empowers you to be more like Him. So now, if you are getting God, you figure you'll be able to do whatever is in God. Like you can heal like Jesus, you can heal like Yahweh, you can raise the dead and so on. Because once God comes in you, once Elohim comes in you, you can then do what He does. So all of the stuff of God is then in you, or should be there according to the teaching qualitatively. So if the power is there to raise the dead or heal the sick, that's what you say. And that's why people pray and fast so much, because they're trying to access more of this power. They believe it's there because they've received the Spirit and so on, and they studied the Word of God and so on. Now, if you can get the healing in God to heal people, to raise the dead and so on, and work miracles, that they told us there was lots of messiahs in Jesus' time and before that was working miracles as well and so on. So Jesus wasn't unique. So basically though, if somebody has the Spirit, they have the stuff that works the miracles. Well, you should also then, by having the Spirit of Yahweh in you, have the long-lasting, evermore perpetual kind of power and attributes and so on. What is in him? So how does Jesus have this and still lose his body? You see, if he is displaying the miracles and exuding all of the other magical stuff in the text, how come he does not exude as well the everlasting, evermore, perpetual life that's in him? Because you feel when you are transformed, you get life everlasting, and it spiritualizes even the cells in your body. And you go back to ancient Egyptian stuff, because even they believe that they would live forever or they would return, because they feel that when they meditate and do their stuff well enough, and the levels of the spirit they get to, and the sound technologies and whatever, and the light and whatever, basically, the more of the spirit you get, the longer you will live or live everlasting. So God is in Jesus because he is Elohim, or he is full of Elohim. And the life does not permeate the cells of his body so much that death cannot seize him. So death overpowers all the life that is like just taking over his body. You see, what you need to do to see that this New Testament is fake is just to think for yourself. When you think of like ascended masters and the gurus that you hear of, and the old man on the mountain sitting on for 20 years meditating, and they're telling you they can do all this kind of stuff, and people talking about levitation and all kinds of stuff they talk about, and transcendental stuff and whatever. This is all that Jesus is about. But if he is Elohim, how can he be packed with Elohim and it not do something to the very cells in his body so that even blood loss does not remove his life? What's the guy in the movie, the X-Men movie, Wolverine, and he gets cut or damaged while fighting and his body gets healed instantly, just about. So they wound Jesus on the cross, they nail him up and they pierce his side, and all of the Elohim power that's everlasting and evermore, a long duration, Olam that's in him, the life that's in him, does not heal back the wound from the spear in his side right away and heal the wound in his nail hands right away to perpetuate his life on the cross. They should have had to take him down and say, look, this one can't die. This must have really been God, the God of the Hebrews. This is fake, people. The New Testament is fake. But the word Olam, it goes on to say forever, always, continuous existence. But Jesus gets none of this continuous existence on the cross. He actually dies. How do you be Elohim and succumb to any kind of death ever? Never in the Old Testament did Yahweh Elohim succumb to death in any form. He tells the Hebrews that they are their own kind of Elohim. He said, you are Elohim, you are gods, but you will die like men. And I think Jesus repeated that. But he himself, as the master Elohim, the creator, never gets to suffer this kind of death. So when he says you are Elohim, but you will die like men, that means he's telling you, and think of Ecclesiastes 8 verse 8 now, that says no man hath power to retain his spirit in the day of death. Right? So if he's saying you are gods, but you will die like men, it's saying that Elohim does not die, but when you are only man, you will die. So Jesus, if he suffers death, he's not Elohim at all, except to be Elohim on the level of how the Hebrews were Elohim. Jesus is Elohim in that sense, but not Elohim from quote-unquote heaven. He was never sent from heaven. He was never Yahweh, or had anything to do with Yahweh in a way that is greater than any other Hebrew Israelite had something to do with Yahweh. Jesus was just a man from the tribe of Judah, if he ever lived. So Jesus is just on the level of man, mortal man, a Hebrew. He was never on the level of Elohim the Creator from Genesis chapter 1. that kind of Elohim from Genesis chapter 1. Never ever. So he cannot forgive sins. He cannot redeem anybody or reunite the two kingdoms based on no death on Calvary to die for the transgressions of Israel. Jesus is anti-Elohim. He is not Elohim. He is anti-God. He is not God. Except just to be on the level of how other Hebrews were gods when it says, ye are gods. Even the Philistines said in, I think, 1 Samuel chapter 4, the Philistines are like, these be mighty gods, talking about the Hebrews. And they're saying, let's get ourselves together to fight strong because these Hebrews, they be mighty gods. Jesus would then only be just the same as any other Hebrew Israelite who's just a god on the level of man. He has nothing divine about him, nothing powerful about him to make him no Elohim. So when the angel came now telling them in the New Testament that that which is born in you is born of God and it's the Spirit of God, it's complete made up stuff. No truth to that. The New Testament is bogus. Because it says there, Olam means continuous existence, perpetual, everlasting, indefinite, or unending future. But his life ended on Calvary's cross. His life ended. And so they wrote that he resurrected again, and then he's never been seen ever after. For 2,000 years. Because he died. That's the end of him. According to the story. Anybody can just write that he resurrected, but there is no presented proof of that in our world, that he resurrected. The proof of his resurrection is for him to show up now in our time, since he hasn't done it for the past 2,000 years, and show us that he resurrected. He cannot show up because he never resurrected from anything. But only on the pages of the book does he resurrect. That's the only place he has power, is in the book. This word Olam originated from Alam. It says to conceal, hide, be hidden, be concealed, be secret. You know what that's telling me as I close this out? Actually, I'm going to read one more verse after this. Conceal, be hidden. And it's talking about antiquity, forevermore, and so on. Concealed. Because it's the length of time is outside of the time that the mind can think of and can know of. So the antiquity is outside of time that you can measure in your own mind. How does Elohim, his length of time that he has been alive or that he has existed, be outside of the time that man's mind can measure? But as soon as he hits the cross, some romance end his life in some form? This is ridiculous. This is ridiculous. Elohim's life cannot be ended in any form that he takes. Because just like Wolverine would heal himself fast, the Elohim on the cross should be able to do even more spectacular than that. Instead of them painting a halo on him in the pictures, the halo should have been all over him on that cross. Nobody should have been able to do anything to him and even put him up on the cross. The mere fact that the Romans did not bow and worship him is proving to you that he was not Elohim. Because if Elohim shows up, everybody, whether they are Israelite or not, would have to fall down on their faces. Because if God ever shows up on earth, you best believe you're going to be hitting the dirt. You'll be burying yourself under the ground, digging a hole just trying to hide from the glory and the brightness and the blinding presence of the so-called God of the Bible, if he ever shows up. Now let's read one more here and close this up from Psalm chapter 50. And verse 10 to 12. to expose that Jesus is anti-Elohim. He is not Elohim in any way, shape, or form, like the Elohim of the Torah. Although, as you know, I don't approach the Torah the same way anymore. But still, for those of you who are thinking along the lines of the book, you need to hear this. So, Psalm 50 verse 10 to 12. For every beast of the forest is mine, and the cattle upon 1,000 hills. So he's rich now. Supra rich. I know all the fowls of the mountains, and the wild beasts of the field are mine. If I were hungry, I would not tell thee. This Calvary Messiah of the Hebrews is done for with that clause right there in Psalm 50 verse 12. If I were hungry, I would not tell thee. That strikes down Calvary Messiah of the Hebrews. For the world is mine and the fullness thereof. If I were hungry, I would not tell thee. Do you see, look at all these rich people that you know, the people they, Bill Gates, Donald Trump, all the other rich people you know in the world. If they get a flat tire on a long trip, do they come and tell you that they need $50 to put on another tire? They don't tell you that. If they want to go order a pizza, do they tell you that? Do they tell you that they need help to pay their mortgage? They're short $20? Why? Because their status, their richness, the money, the wealth that they have, puts them on a level where they don't deal with their needs like that. Because they've got so much that if they need just to buy a burger, they wouldn't tell you that. Now, if they need to do something bigger now they'll tell a banker that, although they already got the money, but rich people borrow money still. They don't use their own money a lot, so they'll tell somebody, but they're not going to tell you for these little things, right? Like I just heard one guy bought an abandoned city, an abandoned town, and he's setting it up now to look like some old, someplace in California to look like some old Western kind of city, like when you watch an old Western movie and you see how it looks. So, and he's trying to get the money to do that. Big stuff like that, like he'll borrow money for that. But if he just wants to buy a burger, he's not going to tell you that. He's got enough. Well, Yahweh now is telling you that he's got so much that all of the fowls of the mountains and all of the wild beasts of the fields are his. All of the cattle, every beast in the forest, and basically he's saying the forests are mine as well. So everything is his on earth is what he's trying to say. So if I need anything at all, I would not tell you. It's also trying to communicate to me that it was trying to communicate to me. I thought it was saying, if he had a need, he wouldn't tell you. Then I realized it's not that if he had a need, he wouldn't tell you. It's just that he would not be giving into needs because he would not lack anything. He's got everything. All of the forest, the beast, everything is just his. He's not going to have a need. But Jesus on the cross was saying, hey, I thirst. And just to cut out some time, I was going to read the verse with the thirsting. Well, I'll let you read it yourself if you want to. Isaiah 44 verse 12, where even the goldsmiths and the people making the stuff, they're getting tired and hungry and thirsty and hot and so on, making their idols. But he's saying, look, if I were hungry, I would not even tell you. Why? Because Elohim is not going to have any needs that would let him have to tell you that he needs something like that. But Jesus, being anti-Elohim, was noted in the text asking a woman at a well for some water. He was noted trying to find his way through life just like the other men around him. He had all these needs. He needed food, he got hungry, he got thirsty, and to top it off, when it finally came down to the cross, he's like, look, I thirst. He embarrassed the Elohim of the Torah by going down to such a low state. Even on the cross, he's still saying, look, I need something again. I'm thirsty. And Romans were trying to feed God on the cross. vinegar and water, gall, or whatever they call it, to put him out of his misery faster because it was an analgesic to help him with the pain and so on. Putting God out of his misery. And with all the godness in him, with all the Elohimness in him, if I can put it that way, he dies so fast, within hours. Because people crucified would take days to die. 3 days up to a week sometimes. To die on the cross. Elohim with all the self-healing powers greater than Wolverine's self-healing powers. Jesus died in only a matter of hours. What Elohim was in him? If I was hungry, I would not tell thee, because I have it all. I don't need stuff. But he needed so much, he's even thirsty asking for that. In the end, he needed some help again. He's like, Father, take my spirit, please, and give it back to me. Jesus is anti-Elohim. He is nothing like the Torah God.